Have you ever noticed one hard or frustrating thing happens and suddenly every other anxiety you have gets dragged into the room? For example, traffic problems become job frustrations, the job stressors become money fears become your whole future. And before you know it, you're carrying the weight of your entire life before the original problem has even been dealt with. So if that has ever happened to you, I want to show you what that moment, that pressured moment, may actually be testing. And by the end of this video, you'll know the four parts of how you're responding to look at when the moment starts taking over. So you can catch what's happening earlier instead of letting one difficult moment take over the rest of your day. When pressure keeps stacking without interruption, today's problem doesn't stay today's problem. It gets added to everything you're already carrying. And that is what I like to call one of the happiness taxes. But here's the part I really want you to hear. When pressure starts piling up, it becomes harder to access perspective or make a clean decision, or even notice that your mind has started pulling every other worry into the room. Some of that is capacity, and that's how much bandwidth you have in that moment to deal with the situation. But there's another piece that we don't talk about nearly enough, the actual abilities we use to navigate those moments once they arrive. And those abilities are not always automatic just because you're intelligent, experienced, or usually very capable. So my name is Linda. I am the founder of Wise Women Wellbeing. I work with women in their 50s, women just like you and like me, to help them break free from chronic pressure and build a life of genuine well-being and happiness. And recently I caught myself right in the middle of one of those moments that I was just describing. I was rushing around, getting ready for one of my part-time jobs, and already there was this tug of war going on in my head. Part of me was thinking, I really need this paycheck. And then another part of me was thinking, I don't want to be rushing out the door to a low-paying hourly job that undervalues me. I want to work on the business I'm trying to build into my livelihood. And then something else got added. My mom needed help with something. I had to get gas. Traffic was heavier than I expected. I was watching the clock. I hate being late. And then suddenly the traffic isn't just traffic anymore. Now I'm thinking about the job, then how underpaid and undervalued I feel, and then money and all my bills, and then the business, and then all the reasons, why I wasn't where I wanted to be, where I need to be financially. And within 1 minute, one frustrating morning had become somehow had recruited half of my life into the conversation. And then I felt overwhelmed, deeply unhappy, and feeling like a failure. And this was all happening before 9 a.m. And here's the part that really caught my attention. I was aware of what I was doing. I could actually hear those thoughts stacking up in my mind. But then I added one more. In my mind, I was thinking, Linda, you know better than this. Why are you letting yourself spiral? So then I was not only carrying the original pressure, I was judging myself for how I was handling that pressure. So now your situation may be different. You may be dealing with something even more serious on a daily basis. But the point is that these moments are where something very important becomes visible. A difficult situation doesn't only test whether you know what to do, it can test whether you can still find perspective when your mind has narrowed around the problem, whether you can separate what you can influence in that moment from what you can't, whether you can notice how you're speaking to yourself, before self-criticism adds even more weight. And also whether you can keep one real problem from taking full possession of your attention. So I call that kind of moment a friction test, meaning that in our pursuit of happiness, these moments tell us if we are actually able to practice well-being under real constraints. You don't really know what capabilities become available to you or remain unavailable until life introduces friction. And the friction itself may be very real. A financial problem is real. A difficult job is real. An aging parent needing you is real. So the goal isn't to convince yourself that none of that matters. The trap is what happens when one pressure, one problem starts recruiting every other fear, frustration, or unfinished problem into that same moment. Because when that keeps happening, again, without interruption, you don't necessarily start the next difficult moment from zero. You start meeting today's problems while still carrying some of yesterday's. And then on top of that, other things get added. And then another thing. And then over time, that cumulative weight can make ordinary decision making harder. It'll drain more of your energy and it'll make your life feel increasingly consumed by managing your problems instead of moving toward what you actually want. And if that becomes your default pattern day after day, the cost gets bigger than a bad morning or an exhausting week. You may start making fewer decisions, avoiding harder conversations, backing away from changes that you want to make, because every new challenge will feel like one more thing you just don't have room to carry. And that is how our worlds gradually get smaller while we feel like we're still doing everything that we're supposed to be doing. So learning to recognize these moments matters. If you can begin seeing what is happening while it's happening, you have a better chance of keeping one difficult moment from becoming the emotional weight of your entire life. So if friction is where these capabilities become visible, how do you know what they are? I use something I call the capability audit. And before I walk you through it, here are 3 things I want you to understand. First, when something difficult happens, some of us feel overwhelmed and stuck, while others immediately ask, how do I fix this? And sometimes that is exactly the right question. But sometimes there's something else underneath all of that. And that is, what is this situation requiring from me right now? You may not be able to fix the entire problem today, but the moment that you're in may be asking you to find the part you can influence or hold more than one possible interpretation of what's going on, or to stop adding self-criticism to an already hard situation, or simply to keep one problem from taking over every inch of your attention. Second, we're not talking about personality verdicts. When we talk about capability, we're really talking about what becomes difficult for me to do when friction shows up. It's not about labeling ourselves. And third, you don't have to understand your entire psychological history in the middle of a hard Tuesday. You just need something useful to notice how you're responding. So when pressure hits, the capability audit gives you 4 things to check. So let's get into it. The first capability is agency. Where is my energy going? Imagine you've been told that your department is being reorganized. You can't control that decision, and you can't control what senior leadership does next. You may not even know exactly what it means for your job just yet, but notice what happens to your energy. Does all of it go toward the parts you can't control, like the decision, the people who made it, what they should have done differently, everything that might happen next? The question is not, how do I take control of all of this? It's, is there anything here I can influence, such as maybe it's asking a question, updating your resume, calling someone in your network, or deciding that tonight You are not going to spend 4 hours trying to predict an outcome for which you don't have enough information to do so. Agency doesn't mean pretending you control the situation. It means finding the movable piece inside it. The next capability is perspective. What story am I telling myself about the situation? Let's say someone important to you doesn't return your phone call. The fact is, they haven't called you back. But very quickly, that fact can acquire a story. You might be, interpreting it as like, oh, they're angry, or I said something wrong. Oh, they don't care about me, or, this relationship is changing. And sometimes one of those explanations may eventually prove true. But capability isn't forcing yourself into any kind of story, whether it's positive or negative. It's noticing when one possible explanation has become the only explanation in your mind. So the question becomes, what else could be true here? Not what's the happiest explanation or what's the worst outcome. Just how do I actually know that my first interpretation is the whole story? And that little bit of psychological room matters. The third capability is self-compassion. How am I speaking to myself inside of this moment? Let's say you miss a deadline, you lose your temper. Maybe you spend money you wish you hadn't, or you agreed to something and immediately regretted it. This is where we need to notice the next thing that can happen after that so-called mistake. The event itself is difficult, and then your own judgment starts in. What's wrong with me? I always do this. I should know better than this by now. Now you're carrying both the original problem and a verdict about yourself. Self-compassion doesn't mean letting yourself off the hook. You can still say, I don't like how I handled that situation. I need to repair this, or something like, I want to do something differently next time. But you can do that without turning one behavior into a definition of who you are. So here the question is, am I dealing with what happened? Or am I attacking myself for being the person it happened to? Those are very different things. So the fourth capability, the final capability, is attention. What has taken over my focus? This is the one I was experiencing in that moment I told you about earlier. The frustrations were real, but within minutes, all of them were occupying the same mental space at the same time. And that's worth noticing, because a real problem can deserve our attention without deserving all of our attention. Maybe you're waiting for medical results, and yet there's still a beautiful August evening outside your window. Maybe you're angry about something that happened at work, and yet your entire evening doesn't have to become an extension of the office. So the question here is, has this problem become the only thing I'm able to see right now? Protecting some of your attention from the problem helps us keep the rest of your life accessible while you deal with it. So that's the capability audit. Number one, agency. Where's my energy going? Number two, perspective. What story am I telling? 3, self-compassion. How am I treating myself inside this? 4, attention. What has taken over my focus? You're not using these questions to grade yourself. You're using them to get more precise. So instead of saying, my whole life is a mess, you may begin to see, no, the situation is genuinely hard. And right now I'm having trouble finding the part that I can influence. Or I've turned one frightening possibility into a certainty without proof. Or I've added a layer of self-attack to an already painful situation. Or finally, this one problem has taken over every inch of my attention. Those are very different starting points, because once you can see where the friction is catching you, the problem becomes more workable than the giant conclusion that you're not handling life very well. And, as you're listening to this, you may be realizing that the bigger issue right now is that you barely have enough bandwidth to use any of those capabilities. And if that's the case, I have a video on what I call capacity. I'll link that in the description below because that may be a really great place for you to start. So I want you to sit with this for a second, because if you've been looking at these moments and thinking, I should be better at this by now, or why does this get to me so much? There may be a much more useful way to understand what's happening. A hard moment can ask a lot of you at once. It may ask you to tolerate uncertainty or find the one thing you can influence when most of the situation is outside your control, or keep your first fearful interpretation from becoming the only possible explanation, or deal with a situation or a so-called mistake without turning it into a judgment about yourself. And sometimes we're asked to do several of those things at the same time. Those are capabilities. And being intelligent, experienced, responsible, or highly competent in other areas of your life doesn't automatically mean you've had the chance to practice every one of them under pressure. Because when we think, I'm just bad at this, the door closes on us. But when we realize this is something I may need to become better able to do, that actually opens the door for us. Again, this is not about expecting ourselves to respond perfectly every time life gets difficult. It's about becoming more precise about what is actually happening, because precision gives you something or somewhere to go besides self-judgment or feeling even worse about yourself. So try something with me just for a minute. Think about a recent situation where one difficult thing started becoming everything. We're not here to solve it, and we're not here to, analyze your entire life. Just go back to the beginning of that situation. What was the original problem? And try to say it in one sentence. Maybe it's, my boss sent an email I didn't understand. My sister was upset with me. I got an unexpected bill. I was stuck in traffic and running late. That's the original problem. Now ask yourself, what got added after that? What fears came into the room? What old frustrations got attached to it? What did you start to predict? What did you start to say about yourself? And how did you feel? Just notice the difference between what actually happened and everything the moment started to carry, all those other things. You don't have to make any of it disappear right now, but even being able to separate the original problem from everything that got piled on to that situation can give you a little more room to see what this moment is actually asking of you, what it is trying to teach you. Maybe it's agency, maybe it's perspective, maybe it's self-compassion, maybe it's attention. And that is the shift I want you to practice noticing, not why am I like this, but what is happening here and what do I need to become better able to do? This is where the bigger possibility starts to open up, because imagine what changes when over time you become better at recognizing what a difficult moment is actually asking of you. And none of that means life suddenly becomes easy, but you begin meeting those moments differently. And little by little, you're not spending quite so much of your energy fighting every piece of the problem all at once. You're not adding as much unnecessary weight to what you're already dealing with. And that leaves more of you available for something else, like making decisions or seeing possibilities, having that conversation that needs to be had, trying something new, building what matters to you, moving toward the life you actually want. That's the larger work here, not becoming someone who never gets rattled, because that's unrealistic, but it's about becoming someone who knows herself well enough and has built enough capability to keep finding her way forward when life gets complicated. That's what I mean when I say happiness is the practice of well-being under real life constraints. It isn't waiting for life to become easier. It's becoming better able to stay connected to what matters, to make choices, and keep moving toward the life you want while real life is happening. And that's what living fully after 50 starts to look like. Not a life without pressure, but a life where so much of your attention, energy, and possibility isn't continually consumed by pressure. And one last thing, don't turn the capability audit into 4 more things you need to be good at. That's not the point. Some days you'll see the movable piece immediately, other days you won't. This is a practice. Happiness is a practice. Well-being is a practice. So you notice what catches you, you get more precise, and you become a little bit more able to respond. Again, the goal is not to eliminate friction, it's to stop letting friction decide what happens next. Now, if this video has you thinking about where pressure might be taking up too much room in your own life, you don't have to figure this all out by yourself. I offer complimentary Spark Reconnection sessions. They're short, focused conversations where we can step out of your day-to-day pressure for a few minutes and look at what you actually want more of in your life and what may be getting in the way and where there may still be room to move. So you'll find the link to those in the description below to sign up. I only have a few spots open each week, so if you don't find anything available right away, please keep trying. I would love the chance to talk with you. And if you're realizing that what you need first is more breathing room, more capacity before you can even think about capability, watch the capacity video that I've linked below as well. Because this work isn't about becoming better and better at enduring your life. It's about making sure there's still enough of you available to build the life that you want to build. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.